Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Tactical Baby Gear Podcast. Yeah, exactly. Today,
it's a little early still.
It is early.
Apparently.
It's 9 o'clock. I've got my giant thing of coffee here. I'm ready to get ripping here. We got Larry Kosilla with us today. He is, if you've ever gone on YouTube or on the internet, really in general, and looked up anything about how to clean or detail or whatever with your car, how do I get this stain out? There's a good chance you came across a YouTube video from Larry Kosilla at AMMO NYC. And Larry is like very highly regarded master of his craft, car detailer. He's been doing it for like 150 years by now. And
I look like
he's got like the biggest, right? He's got the biggest detail channel on YouTube with close to 2 million subscribers. Now he's been doing this for a very, very long time. He is the guy that gets to detail the cars that no one else gets to detail. The one of ones, the prototypes, these ridiculous cars. We'll talk about some of those in a few minutes. And by the end of this, there's a good chance you're going to just completely think differently about your car and how you take care of it and what you're doing with it and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to get into some nitty gritty. A little bit of chemistry probably on why things do certain things, and just nerd out on some stuff and have some fun along the way. So, Larry, welcome again. This, by the way, this is the second time. Yeah, but this is the second time we've recorded this because the first time, like,
can you hear me?
I screwed up the audio.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, good. Yay! Take two. All right.
So, what's up, man?
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. Everything is good. This morning is good. We are not getting freezing cold. Last week it was like 30 degrees. Now we have 60 degrees, so that is good. I had the doors open. When the weather is good, that means life is very, very good. So,
for sure.
I'm very happy.
What are you working on? What do you got in the shop there today?
I have a 992 GT3. And then I have this Continental back here. Now, the Continental, the story behind this one, do you want to hear the story behind this one or you wanted to know? All right, so the quick story behind this one is it's pretty interesting and emotional. So essentially, this gentleman called me. He's about my age, late 30s, early 40s, etc. And he said, I have two other brothers, so 3 in total. And we're both 30. I'm 40, he said. My brother's 36, and my other brother's 34, that kind of thing. He said, when we were both 6, 9, and 3, when we were very young, our father was into cars, etc. And unfortunately, randomly, their mother suddenly passed away when the boys were 3, 6, and 9, or some sort of age like that. So the father was distraught, etc. I'm trying to compress this into a whole thing here. And he went to the funeral in this vehicle. Now, the father owns a construction company. He's 6'5", 300 something pounds, like big linebacker type dude. Apparently a very emotional man, because his kids were certainly emotional. They're my age now. And when they went to the funeral and they were in the back seat of this, the father put a license plate on from like a truck or something. The guy was obviously distraught. Police pulled him over, impounded the car. The dad goes like, could there be anything more like horrible right now? I mean, I'm not making this up. This is all on camera. And the guy said, Bafangul, I put it in the garage. I'm not going to work. You can understand. The guy's 35 years goes by. Now they're my age. We pulled it out for the first time. The guy started weeping. I'm like, am I supposed to be filming this right now? Like, it was like a very emotional moment. So we pulled it out, and basically, long and short of it is they want to surprise their dad, who raised 3 kids by himself for 35 years or whatever. And he doesn't know that it's gone, and it's full of mold and mice because they were running all over the place. And so in the next couple of days, I'm going to clean it up, try to get this thing at least running at the very minimum. And then we're going to bring the father down and surprise him. And I think it's going to be ridiculous. But the story alone is it was just amazing to be a part of that. So that's what's going on here. And then, of course, that's a brand new 992, which I think I've seen. We've had more hurricanes here than I've seen these on the road. So these are very rare, of course, with the supply shortages and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, pretty excited to have this.
Yeah. The Continental, what's really funny is, like, as opposite of the end of the spectrum as both of those cars are, they're like equally cool in their own right. Like the Continental that's suicide doors, right? It's like a 16.
Oh yeah, suicide doors. Oh yeah.
I mean, they're just so cool, and they got their own thing, got their cult followings. They're just
The doors
Super,
are
super cool.
stuck. I got to play with them at some point. But yeah, those things are the roof.
I
It
should
doesn't
mention,
go down. Yeah.
yeah, I should mention too. I got Travis on here as well. Everybody that's listening, so
Hello, hello.
my
I'm actually here.
he Travis is a part of every podcast. He usually produces it on the back end, but he's friends with Larry too, and so he's a car guy. So we figured we incorporate Travis into this episode as well. Start talking nerd stuff, but yeah, and that Continental too is a big part of the ammo story in a way where, especially the YouTube story, I guess, really is these crazy old barn finds with these ridiculous stories, and first time it's been washed in 20 plus years, and you're pulling it out of these barns and getting it cleaned up and giving it back to an owner, and there's always some big reveal and some really interesting, neat story that goes around these vehicles. Do you love or hate the barn? Like, what? Maybe it's not the right way to say it. You seem to have a passion. You have a soft spot in your heart for those cars that have like that story. Some of those. What are the most iconic ones in your mind? Those barn finds that you've done.
I mean, so let's back up a second. The barn find itself
Yep.
is a trigger word on YouTube where people can type in and it kind of collapses all the things that they want to see in one. So that's in one video or whatever. But the word is very broad. So
Sure.
when we say barn find, it really represents a car that's been sitting for a long time. It could be in a barn or wherever, a warehouse, etc.
Garage, a shed,
And
or whatever.
exactly, and being able to just sort of take that from not necessarily neglected. They're not usually neglected. They're usually forgotten. I'm too busy. God forbid my wife died. All these things that they're reasonable. Life got away from me kind of thing. And I love the idea of pulling it out and not trying to be too sappy about it, but in today's modern time of we use it for 5 seconds and we throw it away, it's cool to pull one of these things out. Personally, I think older cars have more what we call je ne sais quoi. They have this undefinable thing. They're just very cool to me, as I'm sure a lot of people. I just don't, like everybody else probably, I don't care so much for the like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck on the side of the road again. The carburetor's blah 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 blah. So I love the idea of having a new car, but I like the look of the older cars. So, but even this thing, obviously, I wouldn't kick this out of bed either. This thing's absolutely amazing. But you get my point. So the barn finds category is very popular now on YouTube. It wasn't so much maybe a couple of years ago, but as soon as things become more excited on YouTube, then everyone sort of rushes to that
Yeah,
thing,
the
which is totally understandable.
algorithm pushes it. Yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, let's take a little bit of a step back in history. How did Larry get started detailing cars? You have an interesting story around this. That it's like you leave this big job to detail cars, and no one can really make sense of it. So, tell us the backstory.
Yeah, so I went to what would be considered fancy schools or whatever as an athlete. I didn't have the academic stature for sure, but I certainly worked pretty hard to stay there and get my C's. Yeah, so I
Were you a
eventually.
bad student too? Like you did it and like enough to get by?
So the truth is, no, I was not a bad student. I worked, I feel, harder than most people. But let's say, unlike, my friend Matt Farah or whatever, we both went to high school together. He worked very hard as well. But the guy also is a genius. He's just a very gifted human being. So he could absorb something. And I would do tests in chemistry class. I can visualize exactly who we are. Her name was Mrs. Bongartz. I could sit there and he would absorb something off the board. And I'd be like, because it was a running joke at this. I'm like, how are you understand? That was Greek. What the hell? We don't know what she's talking about. And he would pick it up and be able to repeat it, etc. So, um, yeah, I went to school with a lot of folks like that who are just like. So the point I'm trying to make is, no, I was not a terrible student, but when you're next to you know crazy, super smart people all day long, you're like, well, am I the dumbest guy in the room, kind of thing. So I was definitely like a solid B minus student in like a most ridiculous school ever. So I was way over my head. Anyhow, so certainly prepared me for college because when I went to college, I thought college was just an easy joke compared to high school. High school is way harder than college, in my opinion. But um, so from there, it's sort of like a feeder school. You go into all the fancy things. You go into, doctor, lawyer, et cetera, et cetera. And so I went into Wall Street, which is at the time the New York Mercantile Exchange, downtown New York City, the building existed. I don't think it exists anymore. And if you've seen in some of those older movies, and it just escaped me, with Eddie Murphy, maybe Trading Places, or I forget the movie, but there's a big pit, and there's tons of people in like a stadium sort of atmosphere, and they would take cards and they would yell at each other, 5,000 at $2 or whatever. I'm making that up. We were in natural gas commodities, but the oil commodities and the beans and the oats and all the random commodities that were in the room. Thousands of people like screaming and yelling. It was deafening, and my job was to reconcile. So I'd be looking off to the side and watching him trade back and forth. And then once the trade went into the pit, it would literally, there was a guy with a net around his waist, and the net would go out like really far, maybe 20 feet around in a circle. And there would be a dude here with goggles on. I can't make this up. Goggles on, because people would take they would write the trades down, and they go like this, and they would throw it, and the card, this like a card, like a thing would go
Like a playing card.
And yeah, but like more like this size. It'd be like he would write the trades down this index card, but bigger and kind of thicker, a little bit thicker than a piece of paper. And he would throw it, and basically you could cut the guy. It was crazy. He would take it, he would stuff it in this thing and shoot, and put it down a chute, and it would go downstairs. And then a bunch of people downstairs would type in all the words that were on the note. And so here's the twist in the story. The gentleman who I worked for, very nice man, very focused, let's just put it that way. He had a deformity in his fingers. And he was kind of like, he had a deformity in his hands. And so he couldn't play sports as a kid. So he decided to become, quite frankly, very wealthy and buy sports teams and all these kinds of things, hockey teams, etc., in the minor leagues, minor league baseball, minor league hockey. And so how we would support the team would vary by day by day. He'd be up $10 million, down $2 million, over $3 million. And so why does that matter? It matters because his hands were deformed. As he was writing, he'd be writing like this, right? And he'd be writing a trade down. And so when you throw the thing in the pit and the guy grabs it and it goes down the chute, somebody else has to read it. And then they say, he sold 10,000 at 2. And then I would go back in and reconcile what the person downstairs did. And then they would say 10,000 at $1.50. I'm making these random numbers up. You'd be like, or 10,000 at $3. That's like $25 million off. So my job was to reconcile that. So I'd have to go in and basically read this chicken scratch. It was quite a job. Just leave it at that. So it was crazy. So anyways, I left there and my brain poured out of my ear, but I knew that was not something I wanted to do. And long and short of it, I had an epiphany that said, I thought I needed to make a lot of money to play with cars. And I realized I just wanted to play with cars. And if you become the best at what you want to do, you can, obviously make some money in the process of doing that. Certainly not what he was making, because he was absolutely destroying the industry. I mean, he was killing it, making a lot of money. So from there, fast forward, I saved enough money to buy a car wash in my hometown, which at the time was Rye and Harrison. This particular one was Harrison, which is the next town over, but relatively close. And I ran that for about 4 or 5 years. I took Matt Farah also came in. That's when he sort of started in the car world as well. And we were partners in this car wash along with another gentleman. And we built it up into being something, meaning it was more than just a car wash. I know that sounds ridiculously corny or whatever, but there's a point behind, maybe a business lesson or whatever. We turned it into something that gave men, in this case, a couple of women, but mostly men, 72 of them to be exact, a membership. So what happened was I would be, working away and cleaning cars and doing my thing or whatever. And a lot of people would just want to come and look at these cars as it is today. We're in a location where people would never find us really here unless you know where you're going. My other shop was at a point in the road. So like everybody would drive by. It was a great, a car wash kind of thing. And so we had a lot of business. Folks would come by, literally put lawn chairs as if they were at a car show. Like they would pull up their Corvette or whatever, put a lawn chair in the driveway and just watch the cars getting done. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm the new guy in town. I'm 20 something years old. I was doing 30 washes a day along with probably 3 or 4 details. We had 4 guys. So that means I was doing the wash.
This is like a manual, like Larry's washing the cars. This isn't like your drive-through automated car wash.
Like this. I had 2 bays. Literally 2 bays, and I was doing the 2 cars outside, so it was really cold. And we had an awning that would come out to give us a little bit of shade. It was crazy. So it was crazy hot in the summer and crazy cold in the winter, obviously. So anyways, long story short, again, I said, hey, if you want to hang out here, that's cool, but you got to pay a membership. I was like, you know, $1,000. And a lot of these guys are so wealthy. They were like, yeah, sure. And so we created a thing called the New York Motor Club. New York Motor Club, Matt Farah ran, and we put on all these events. We would go drive in the city, go to wine and cheese event, and all these things, just an excuse to drive the car. So this is the point I'm trying to make is when you're creating something, you're not just doing the thing. You have to give somebody a reason why, meaning you're not just making widgets. You're not just making cereal boxes. People buy the cereal box because they want the toy inside, that kind of thing. So we created that toy, which was called the New York Motor Club at the time, which was an excuse for men and women to drive their car, go somewhere and sit in a lawn chair and watch somebody do work. It's like a dog whistle. I mean, they all went like, oh my gosh, I have to come, right? And watch. So that was kind of my first thought in how to inspire people to kind of enjoy the process of something else, meaning the work is you're selling car washes, but what you're really selling is this excuse to enjoy and be around your car, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of my first dive into that. Fast forward another couple of years, I started developing products. I mean, I was working with an outside company who was supplying my car wash with chemicals, and it turned out, like, respectfully, they just didn't know. They said, hey, we're going to give you this product, this random product, in a bottle, and we want you to test it and use it on their car, and this is what we're selling, et cetera. And I was like, the person who was selling it was a salesman and a little bit of a chemist, like he knew a little bit of the right words to say, but wasn't a detailer. And so I was like, this is weird. We're selling products that you're not like an expert in. It's like going on an airplane. The guy's like, yeah, I played the simulator before, but I actually never flew the plane. I'm like, this is insane, right? Like, why would I ever want to? So I started consulting with them, saying like, hey, let's put some extra abrasives or emulsion or whatever it was in this particular case of whatever we were making back then. It was 15 years ago. And so I just became more and more involved in it. And then I realized, wait a second, they, fake it till you make it. They didn't really know. I mean, they were genuine. They were trying to do the best they could, but they didn't know. So I sort of worked with them one-on-one from a detailing perspective to figure out what would work on the car and say, like, I need more of this. And then eventually I would just stand there and watch the chemist. And the moral of the story is it's like baking a cake. You can eventually figure out how to do that. Again, fast forward another 2 or 3 years, I started working with them even closer. And like a young 20-year-old idiot, I took, instead of payment, I took, I was able to supply my car wash with enough products where I could take it off the cost of goods sold on the P&L. So that was like, oh yeah, I saved 20 grand this year or whatever on. So that was cool. Then the chemist that worked there ended up retiring, and the CEO of that company basically said, we're in trouble now. And I was like, well, I've been watching this guy for 3 years. I can make this in my sleep. I'm still running a car wash. I had a mobile truck at the time. I had a car wash and a mobile truck. So I was all over the place. So I would work at night making these products and then filling my van. Again, fast forward another couple of years, I said, hey, why don't we just make better products? For example, I went to him and I remember sitting at his desk. I never forget this. He had big beer belly, the whole thing. And I was like young. And I remember walking up to him and I'm like, okay, so when you're making 630 gallons, there was these bathtubs. They were absolutely ginormous, probably a little bit bigger than the size of this car. Big bathtub, 630 gallons, 660 gallons, depending on how much you wanted to make. And you were making car wash soap. In car wash soap, you would take I think it was 3 or 6, I can't remember, so many years ago, but 3 bags that are 90 pounds each. So you take them, boom, put them over your shoulder and pretending this is like the top of the bathtub or whatever. You would get on your tippy toes and you take a razor blade and cut the bag, and then pour 90 pounds of NaCl into car wash soap. Do you know what NaCl is?
No clue, teacher.
That is very basic table salt. So you put table salt into this product to increase the viscosity. So when you increase the viscosity of a car wash soap, you do 2 things. One is you give the impression that the soap is stronger because it's thicker, it's goopier. Like, would you want thin oil in your car or do you want thick oil in your car? That's a bad example, but you get the idea from like a 10,000-foot view. Oh, I want the thick stuff. It's more concentrated, right? The second thing you can do with increasing the viscosity is you can cut it just like forgive the analogy, but it's very true. You can cut it just like drugs or cocaine or whatever, right? You can spin it out and make more money. That's just, I wouldn't know, by the way, but I'm just saying. So I've heard
Yeah,
on
the guy
Netflix,
from Wall
Scarface.
Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New York.
I've watched
yeah.
Narcos. You guys watch Narcos. I mean, come on, right? So,
Yeah.
so we did those two things. So basically, I walk in one day and I said to him, I never forget this guy because I don't talk to him anymore. But I said, hey, I'm just a young guy making stuff, and you're the big boss man or whatever. Having said that, I'm putting like whatever it was, 120 pounds in 600 gallons of table salt, straight up table salt out of the bag in car wash soap. And I said, sir, I know you're not a detailer. I know, that's above and beyond you and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just the grease monkey here. But in wintertime, your car gets all dirty and all that stuff. What are we washing off our car? And he's like, I don't know, Larry. Like, get to the point. I said, well, when you drive around in the Northeast, he said, I was like, there's salt on your car. There's mud, dirt, salt, etc. And so now we're using a product, soap, which is a thing that emulsifies and lifts the dirt, etc. We've just added salt into something that we're trying to clean off. I was like, I know I'm a bit of a moron here, but that doesn't make any sense to me. It's like cleaning grease with grease. It doesn't. So, and he's like, yeah, that's great. Go downstairs. We're going to cut it. And that's why we cut it. And he explained all the business reasons for doing something like that. And I was like, hey, do you care on the side after hours? And I make, because I was already there after hours, but like super late, I make my own stuff because I don't want to put crazy stuff on there. Obviously there's degrees of salt. Sometimes you have to think there's other things, but I'm using a 10,000 foot view. There's sometimes you have to put salt, like a sodium type product in there for cleaning purposes, but you get my idea. This was like blatant, straight up, like dumping tables, like hundreds of pounds in it just to thicken it up so we could cut it more to make a very cheap product. So I basically made my own stuff on the side. And I went nuts. I once made, I think I told you off camera once, I made tire shine that was like $300 for like a 16-ounce bottle because I put like unrefined like oil from the ground. Like it's sort of like, I think I made the analogy. It's sort of like eating diamonds so you can see your poo twinkle in the light afterwards. It's completely ridiculous, but I was going nuts and trying to figure out like what would be the best thing that I could make with no money, without having like this, we have to make it the cheapest as possible. So I ended up making, long story short, I ended up making my own stuff. And I had my own formulas because I was literally making formulas all day long. I have hundreds of books because when you make a formula, you have to mark down. They had all these like scales and parameters and things on the wall that would be like, okay, today's humidity is such and such, today's temperature is such and such, we're starting at such and such time, but everything, because if something went wrong, I'd have to go back. It's called batch collection, etc. If something went wrong, we have to look at it. So I've been doing and baking these cakes forever. And then eventually I went and I said, hey, the stuff that I'm making is badass. It is way better than the stuff that the formula that I have to make, right? And he's like, yeah, that's great, but we're selling to car washes. Like nobody cares. They go like, how much is this 55-gallon drum versus that 55-gallon drum? That one's $300 and that one's $400. We're going to take that one. It's like, well, does that one? So you could manipulate a lot by the percentages. And so I said, hey, why don't we go retail? Be great. And I remember specifically, he goes, he smiles, he goes, you're so, that's great, Larry. But if you think you're going to compete with Meguiar's and Mothers and Armor All and all those other people, that kind of thing, it doesn't work that way. You need like $500 million to start. And I was like, okay, but there's an internet. There's a thing called the internet. And this thing on the internet is called YouTube. It just started in 2009 or whatever it was. And I was genuine. It wasn't like, oh, there's a thing on the internet. Like YouTube was new. I was like, why don't we just show people how to do it? Because I can't find the answers. Let's do this how-to on the internet. Because I have these stacks of I used to print out all these pages and look online and read about like what random detailer was doing this or that, Kevin Brown, etc. And he's not random, of course, but you get my point. All the things that he wrote, I'm reading all this stuff. I'm like, well, why don't we just make a video about it? Because I don't want to sit here reading a 10-page thing on how to wash a wheel right or whatever. So again, YouTube went nuts and we started that. And that's when YouTube took off. And that's a whole other conversation. I can certainly fill that in. But that's the short version of how the company started. And then 10 years later, we're in 70 something countries. And I think people realize like, oh, someone who actually makes the products and actually details the cars, that's where it really became tangible for a lot of folks.
Yeah, yeah, and that was something I don't think I mentioned in the intro, is that Larry's got a whole product line, right? So if you go to his website, ammonyc.com, it's soaps and coatings and protectants and all kinds of stuff that there you go.
Everything you need to clean and detail a car and
There you go.
Yeah,
keep it going.
yeah, it's awesome. And I'm going to try to persuade Larry into 10% off for everyone listening.
Nice. We
So,
can make that
there's
happen. We'll take it out of Travis's salary. It's fine.
There
Yeah,
you go.
there we go.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly. Here's one. You know what? All the times I've talked to you and we've spent on the phone and chit chatting and videos we've watched and whatever else. Why the name Ammo?
Good question. It's a very random answer that may not be terribly exciting, but when we're detailing a car, let's say this car right here, for example, when I'm detailing it, of course I don't have anything because I cleaned it all out of the way, but I put my stuff all the way around it. Meaning I put my little carts, I put my little steam, I cleaned up obviously, but I put all my things around it. And then one customer came out and I remember like, oh, he put his hands here and he walked out like this and he goes, you're like, man, you got a lot of ammo around here. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I was like, that would be a pretty badass name, right? And so I said, man, it'd be really sweet. It meant the world to me. I didn't care if I sold anything. Of course I do now. Of course, kids and the whole, I'm not pretending that I'm Mother Teresa by any means, but the goal from day one was to just put my name, which was this, on a bottle and have it when I was cleaning a car with my name on it. I thought, this is the end all be all. Why? Because that Dingleberry from back then was like, you just don't even waste your money and time thinking that you're going to go compete with these people. But in his defense, he didn't know about the thing that was YouTube. YouTube was brand new. I didn't know YouTube. And so YouTube ultimately was the equalizer.
How did you end up getting started in YouTube then? How do you go from your car wash in New York and helping this guy make stuff to then sort of developing your own thing, and then now you've got 2 million subscribers on YouTube?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. So when I mentioned before that I was working with Matt Farah in the car wash, and he was basically the head of New York Motor Club, and I was doing my thing, like actually doing the cars. He was creating the parties and the driving and the marketing, so to speak. Well, he went on a show called Fast Lane Daily back then. I don't think it exists anymore. And he was talking about car related things. I forget what it was. And he was really good on camera, as you can tell today. He was just super comfortable. And his mission there was to promote the New York Motor Club. He was wearing New York Motor Club, etc. And then fast forward 6 months, he was on every single day, and I never saw him again because he was just so talented there. Rightfully so. He said, hey, I'm going to go to LA and really try to do this on my own. And so he left. I continued running the company, and a year or two go by. He has his own show called Tuned, I think it was, on the Drive channel, which was created. The Drive channel was created because Google, which owns YouTube at the time, spent $100 million on separate channels to kind of funding to kind of push the Drive, to have people, no pun intended, to push the people to go from watching television to watching YouTube. Looking back on it now, 15 years later, I was like, oh, that's amazing to think that they made that initiative,
Yeah, similar to what like Netflix has done and Amazon,
right.
Like funding,
paying for content.
Yeah, they're just filling their platform with content and paying for people to be able to do it. It's like, here's a salary, go make content for our platform.
Right. So that's funny you said that. I never thought about it that way. So YouTube was sort of the impetus behind Netflix and Amazon doing that, 15 years later or whatever it was. So at that point, with some money, I think the channel got $2 or $3 million or whatever of the 100 million, maybe even less. I don't even know. I wasn't part of that, but not that much money in the grand scheme of things. They got enough to fund Matt Farah, Chris Harris, Mike Musto, Alex Roy, et cetera, a bunch of kind of known people at the time. Now they're all, very, very popular and huge. And so anyways, this channel was born with the Drive channel, and in the Drive channel, there was multiple shows, right? So 2 years goes by or whatever it is. And I said, Matt, you're doing, wow, this is amazing. This YouTube thing is pretty cool. I said, hey man, it would be really awesome if, I could show people. Remember I was mentioning before, there was no like how to, there was nothing about car cleaning, how to change your toilet bowl, how to work on your house, or whatever those kinds of
lawnmower blade or whatever.
Right, exactly. That was what YouTube really was, how to. Not so much anymore. We can talk about that later. But I said, let's do a how-to car cleaning show. It did not get received very well. They said, that's just weird. That doesn't make any sense. And at the time, we didn't know about a thing called evergreen content, meaning when you clean something or show how to change a toilet bowl, it's going to last for the next 30, 40 years. We didn't know that. We didn't know anything about YouTube, as opposed to, let's say, non-evergreen content where you say, we're going to take the 2005 Corvette and show you how it's so great and do burnout with it. Well, guess what? In 2006, kind of a relevant video
it's
now.
Irrelevant. Yeah.
Right.
Got a
So
life cycle.
We didn't know that, and we didn't know anything about the algorithms and YouTube and TubeBuddy and all these things that are in the background that are, crunching the numbers, because the numbers didn't exist. We were creating the numbers. So again, I said, hey, I will do this. Just please get me an introduction to the producer. His name was JF. He's a good friend of mine now. And let me chat with him. So I went in New York City. I'll never forget this. It was a second floor of a Starbucks. And I wrote up a little plan. I had my little piece of paper here, and I said, here's my plan, etc. I want to shoot this series. And he was like, we don't really have a whole ton of money, and I don't think this is going to do really well. And I said, okay. And then I kind of pulled the thing, quiver. I was like, then I will pay for the first 3 episodes. If I pay for the first 3 episodes and they do well, I want to get a full season. And he's like, whatever, man. Like, I gave him zero risk. So we funded the first 3 episodes. Nothing to lose. And so the first 3 episodes cost a fortune because I literally had no idea what we were doing, like just not a clue. I wrote so many scripts, and I remember practicing my lines or whatever, because there wasn't this like hold the camera and like, hey guys, on today's whatever, there wasn't like this vlog type attitude. So it was we had 12 people on set to do one video, sound people, makeup people, lighting people. I mean, it was like ridiculously expensive.
You were treating it like a full treating it like a full production of like a proper television show versus what's now so acceptable to be like on a cell phone doing this crap half the time, and people watch it.
We had no point of reference. It was amazing to think, look back on it now. We had no point of reference. So I did my first episode on an Audi R8, which was like my halo car at the time. And it did well. So if we take like the best of the best, like Chris Harris, everybody knows Chris Harris, Top Gear, et cetera, et cetera. So Chris Harris was on the show. Let's say he did 100,000 views. Staggering amount of views back then, 100,000 views. Like, holy cow, your brain exploded. I would do like 25 or 30,000. And it was like, I'd just be in the corner being like, yeah, I'm awesome. This is great, right? And so I just kind of kept low. And at the end of the year or whatever, it was timed perfectly, I guess. But I did my 3 episodes and we didn't do anything else. And then kind of a flag in the ground happened where JF said, okay, all the creators, let's come in. Let's have our annual Christmas dinner or whatever the hell it was, right? And so we'd sit down and go over all the stats. And the moral of the story is he'd be like, the number one thing was Chris Harris, and Matt Farah had the most views or whatever it was. And it turned out that what really mattered, views and subscribers and all that kind of stuff, it matters, right? But what really mattered was retention. And that was the aha moment sitting in the room. I was next to Mike Musto, and Alex Roy was sitting next to me. I never forget these moments because they were so like vivid in monumental for me, that I remember looking up at the board or the thing, TV or whatever he had, and it said, for the most retention, it was drive clean. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, you didn't think you're going to be at like it wasn't an awards show by any means, but it was enough where I was like, really?
Yeah, a little pat on the back, a little,
that kind of thing. And I was like, wow. And here, like, let's say somebody watches a video. When you say retention rate, for those that don't live and breathe YouTube like we do, when you have a retention rate, let's say the video is this long, right? And this is 10 minutes. Retention rate is if you're at 50% retention rate, that means you are watching 50% of the video. Pretty simple, right? In the early days, not so much anymore, retention, let's say if this was 100%, I was getting 103%. And people are going like, that's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. And so if you break it down, on average over time, that means they're watching the entire video and then they're going back and watching a scene again, right? And so that categorizes that added up to the percentages. What that means to
they're
a
watching
YouTube,
a total of 13 minutes of a 10-minute video, and you're like, how what? What's because they went back and watched this little thing. Like, what was that little thing he just did? How did he do that? What did he say there?
And that was sort of the linchpin. That was the pivot point to have people go like, oh my gosh, evergreen content, having people continually go back. What does that mean? It means more money for the channel, their channel at the time. They're going to have to watch another ad to go back. Once you watch another ad rep, et cetera, you can follow the rest of the play. So that's where everything kind of started. And then from there, they were like, oh, can you produce more? And I was like, I can produce more, but you're paying for it this time. And so I produced like a couple, a couple more seasons. We're talking like, I think it was like $800 or like $1,200 an episode. And again, we didn't have the hold the camera. I was like, okay. And so instead of 12 people, we had like, 8 people. And it was still like a $20,000 shoot or whatever. You know what I mean? I was like, this is my big break. So I just quadrupled down on it. Fast forward a couple of years, I started hosting.
What year was that? That was what? Probably 2011-ish? What year was that?
Yeah, I'm going to say 2011-ish for argument's sake. 2010, 2011, 2012 is when it's really started getting going. And then I started hosting other shows, started doing like TV commercials for Chevy. All these things started like coming out, which were a really cool thing. And then ultimately I said, well, wait a second, like, why would I continue doing just this? Meaning, let's do this and start my own channel under Ammo, because I had such a great foundation at that point. So the moral of the story is that, the Drive channel really did a whole lot for me to open up my eyes and figure out YouTube and kind of get going, because there was literally no detailing channels, zero. And so
it's nice.
Started that.
Yeah, well, it's cool that you got to be a part of that channel, because they clearly had a lot figured out and had a lot of understanding of how things worked. And then you guys obviously learned a lot together, understanding retention time. There's actually a metric for that now that's not retention time. It's views per person, I think, is the metric. And it's like, 1.6, 2.2, whatever. It's like getting people to watch it. There's a metric for that now. If you've paid attention.
No,
yeah, they actually have that is like a separate metric.
There's a metric for everything now on analytics, as you can imagine.
Yeah, and they all play a part. We'll get into more YouTube nerd out stuff here in a second, and I think that's kind of where we're going. But it's like you were fortunate enough to be part of a crew and a group of guys who really had it figured out, had some traction. You got to be part of that, and they fast-tracked maybe a little bit of YouTube success. Now, I wouldn't say for you, because you were doing the work, but it helped you sort of fast-track.
I think that's a fair statement. It was a perfect storm, the way I think about it. If you think about 3 things, I had YouTube, the fact that I got this crazy experience as a manufacturer, chemist kind of world, right? And so if you take those 2 things, plus the fact that I'm also an actual detailer and actually fanatic and crazy, and like people meet me and they think I'm nuts, kind of thing.
So handsome.
Yeah, thank you. You jerk.
Perfect hair all the time.
Perfect hair, yes. Anyways, if you take those perfect storms and you combine them together, meaning what I mean by manufacturing is, at the time there was these massive companies, and they're still massive, McGuire's, Mothers, Armor All, et cetera, right? They're so big that they didn't have, I don't think, a lot of people on the ground. Maybe they did. I don't want to speak out of turn. I know a couple of my friends used to work there, but the point is that there was no small mom and pop shops at that time that were prevalent. Maybe there was some. I don't know. I can't speak to every one of them. But the point I'm trying to make was I caught that wave, and then you caught the YouTube wave, and the 2 of those combined with the fact that I'm actually a detailer and actually doing it in higher energy and all those other attributes, you put all of them together, that's what kind of exploded, versus, let's say, having 500 people in your company and started 10,000 years ago. You see how
well, the timing was good too. You started on YouTube at early enough to where there wasn't a lot of noise. You were trying to break through a bunch of all that stuff. Like, same with early Instagram. Like, I built my business on the back of Instagram. Back in 2013, when things like Instagram was chronological and all of your followers saw everything you posted every single time. And now, they start to build these algorithms in and all stuff. And then it just gets progressively harder to understand those algorithms, to game those algorithms, to really excel. It becomes harder and harder and more challenging as time goes on. And there's more, it's supply and demand, right? Like as there's more content available, then you've got to weave your way through that to the consumer somehow. And that turns into, for you on YouTube, really is like titles and thumbnails, period. End of story. The titles and the thumbnails. And then the video has to be good. Like you need some retention. You need to try to get that 50% retention rate, I think is currently kind of the benchmark, right? Like if you can get somebody to watch 50% of your video, that's really good. And your videos, I mean, you're so long-winded and you talk for hours. Your videos are like, 15, 20, 25 minutes. And you get awesome retention. And I can only imagine the watch minutes is through the roof. And you've got like, I don't know, how many hundreds of videos do you have on your channel at this point?
Yeah,
Like
I think just on my channel, I have, like probably 250 videos, but all said and done, drive clean, wrenched, auto blog. I mean, I have tons of videos so they're all kind of what I call fishing lines that are out there. I have tons and tons of lines that are out. So it worked out well.
But the title and the thumbnail now is just the hardest thing and it's like I have to try to tell myself this, and I'm the absolute worst with titles and thumbnails. I think I do a good job, but then you realize real quickly, and it's like humbling because you're like, yeah, this is gonna crush it, and then it sucks, and you're like, yeah, I suck at this.
Yeah,
but you can't get 1 million views if 1 million people don't click on it. So you got to start with like getting people to actually click the video.
Yeah, I spend so much time on thumbnails. It's not even funny, and it's like it's this constant like moving I don't know. There's no like do this and it works unless you have like, not to be funny, not to be silly. I'm trying to be quite serious here. Unless you have a woman on there that is dressed a certain way, etc., or something that's just like, okay, come on, like give me a break. That's how back in the day they would sell car soap, and I'm very anti that. With the bikini and washing it with their boobs or something. It's like you got to have a little bit of class here, kind of thing. So you can do that, and I do think you would get the views, but I think people looking at it would be like, I'm not going to watch this guy anymore. So you may have a one and done. So you have to walk this balance of like how true.
To be careful. Yeah, and that kind of rides that line of like clickbait, right? And we just had John Malecki on the last episode, and he's a big YouTuber. He's got how many subscribers? 500, 600,000 subscribers or something. Anyways, you guys go watch that one. We talk about some YouTube stuff there, but he's a woodworker. He was a former NFL football player for the Steelers and a bunch of other teams, but mainly known, I guess, for the Steelers. And he left there at a young age, and he's like, it's funny because like playing football professionally is not real life. Like it sets you up for nothing. All you know how to do is play football, and you get out of that, and like
you're in fantasy land.
Yeah, you're in fantasy land. He's like, you get paid a bunch of money to play a child's game, and you are not set up for the real world after that. You've no real life experience. You've never worked in a business or an office because you've been playing football since you were 9 and you were good enough to get to the NFL. And then you get cut and you're like, screw this, I'm done. And now he's 24 and he has no real life skills. So he picks up woodworking, and then he starts a YouTube channel, and he had great success with it. And he's done really well. And anyways, the point of that quick backstory on that episode was that he says, I don't like to say clickbait because I think everyone has their own definition of clickbait, where you feel like it's a bait and switch. Like I clicked on this for this video, but this is not even close to what that video was about.
Right.
He called it clicky. He's like, we make clicky titles and thumbnails. And I said, I like that word. Clicky.
Yeah, that's good.
Is this clicky?
Yeah. You get the payoff in the video. It's not it's not the switch. You get what you got, but it's just
you gotta ride that
intriguing.
Line.
It made you interested enough to click it. And that was kind of how they look at it.
Yeah, so interesting.
I think what we've also found here too is if the character of the show isn't in it, we find that that's not as some people disagree with that as well. So meaning I'm the character in my episodes. We're talking in very technical terms right now or whatever, right? So I'm the character in the show. So if I'm not in the thing,
in the thumbnail,
the thumbnail, kind of doing that, we actually see that it has less clicks overall.
That's big. Yeah. I like obviously because of who you are, right? And because you're very recognizable at this point. If it was me, it doesn't matter. Nobody knows who the hell I am, relatively speaking, where it's like I could be in it or not, and it doesn't really matter. It's more about whatever the video subject is. But you are such a known personality in person that like I would totally understand.
But isn't it interesting how Larry's each one is its own thing? You see how like yours isn't like you don't need to be in it, but I need to be in it.
It's
If I'm
not
cleaning, it's like
YouTube. That's the thing. There is no one size fits all. Like do this, this, and this, and you'll
that's
crush it.
right. That's right. So I think
Doesn't
all these
exist.
podcasts, all these things that you read, Kurt's podcast, all these things are great. You just have to like absorb as much as you possibly can and then figure out
And then
how it's going to work.
apply.
Yes, there's no like step one, wash the car by first spray wax. You know what I mean? It's like there's no YouTube is awesome and me personally, Beav and Trav, like losing my mind. Like, why is this video not working? I don't understand. I changed
Chasing
thumbnails.
click-through rates and all.
Oh, it's so annoying. And then you'll do one where it's like a 5-second shoot. I say this all the time. I took the badge off the back of a GTR. I did that in like 10 minutes with like an iPhone or some horrible thing. And I ended up burning myself. And everybody loves the burning myself. You remember that video when you burned yourself? I'm like, yes, it took me 6 minutes.
Yeah.
But do you remember the one that I spent 3 weeks on and like took dead animals out of? Yeah, I don't remember that one. So the point of the story is it's like you're constantly chasing this algorithm. So I've sort of, here's my other piece of advice. I am trying now, again, with your tutelage, I'm just trying to make what I think is right. Because I feel like as soon as you start chasing, you're not leading anymore. And it's also very depressing at sometimes if you're trying to like value how good things are and how good you are based on how many views and how many clicks. It's like at some point, it's like, holy cow, you got to like shut your phone off kind of mentality. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
It could really mentally affect you. Like you could have it could really change your whole mood of a day or even a week or even a month, depending on how things are going. Trying to chase some of those metrics, and you're like, it's at the end of the day, it's just a stupid number that I feel has to hit a thing to validate myself.
That's right.
And it's really unfortunate, but it's the nature of
it's the nature of the beast.
Of it.
But now take a step back, and I love doing these kind of 10,000 foot view things. I say that a lot. If you look at the business model itself, you have YouTube, right? Google, YouTube, etc. And then you have these other companies, what I call 20th century companies that have been around a long time and they're very established and they function on momentum, which I call that like the biggest killer you possibly can have because there's no innovation. You're just falling downhill kind of thing, right? And so you have this YouTube that we just went like this far deep into like all the complicated, I barely know anything. You know 10 times more than I do. And I know that you don't know half of what it is. Like it's such a deep hole, right? So you have this thing that now has taken a 20th century business that is momentum, and they're starting to get little fish chipping at them all day long. And now they're like, what the hell? Like what is this YouTube thing? You're like, are you kidding right now? It's been for 15 years. If you don't have this widget, you don't have the turbo in your car, you're not going to compete. If you have the Williams F1 car, you're not going to compete with Mercedes. It's just not going to happen. You don't have the car. So to me, I find that very fascinating how the whole evolution of business, again, from a 10,000 foot view, we went really narrow with YouTube. You get my point? Pretty cool.
Well, and a lot of it is just the innovation of the internet, right? The internet has taken out the middleman. The internet has been able to allows small guys like me and you to compete against the big guy. You and I can compete head to head with some of the biggest companies out there, with respect to the different things that we sell because of the internet. We don't have to chase buyers down and go through Macy's and Target, and you don't have to chase somebody down to pick up your product to put on the shelf in the store like direct to the consumer, cut out the middleman. You can scale it as large as you want, essentially. I mean, you put infrastructure in place and work your way up to it, but the internet has now allowed the little guys to have the ability to compete directly head on head with the big guys. And the big guys, like you said, are operating off of momentum, and they're like working with, yesterday's thought process and mentality, what used to work. And they're stuck on, this is how we've been doing it for 100 years. So this is how we're going to continue to do it. Meanwhile, they're just getting left in the dust. And, now your wheel is starting to get bigger and has more momentum as you continue, and it's like
anything else
it's awesome.
in the world and life, like this evolution, like, adapt or die kind of thing. It's a very trite and used word, but they become cliches because they're actually, important.
True.
So in these 20th century businesses, these 20th century minds, we call them, they're stuck in the way, like, how can we just just absorb something or buy something instead of like actually innovate the thing that we're trying to do. And the internet is the platform that allowed innovators, people who are actually getting bloody knuckles, I call them, whether you're stitching actual things or you're detailing a car or you're making wood things, you're literally getting bloody fingers, right? That's where the magic happens to innovate. And so now these larger companies are going, oh, now what are we doing? Because the momentum is sort of slowing down because smaller companies are throwing roadblocks, what I call little fish, little sunnies biting on the shark. And after a while, you get 10,000 of those bites. You go, well, this is a segmented market. This is starting to hurt a little bit. So I find that really fascinating because to win in this game now, if you look at all these things we just talked about, you got YouTube here, you got, and mine is one little tiny, little silly story, and there's 10,000 stories, including yours, and a million of them, right? Now you have to, as an innovator, a CEO of a company, or small one, you have to step back and look and say, what is the next thing that's going to happen, and how can we prepare for that now? Because I don't want to be the 20th century company just because we got on YouTube and I have a YouTube channel. That is our momentum. That's our younger age momentum. Their momentum was we're going to get 10 billion distributors, and we're going to be around forever, and we're going to put ads in magazines and all this kind of stuff, right? Now we're YouTube, but here's the secret. The next guy, our kids, Beef, you and I, our kids, I don't want them looking at us going, those 21st century guys on YouTube, man, they thought they were cool.
They're still stuck on YouTube.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and
what's the next thing? That's the part that you can't, that's je ne sais quoi. You can't just compress it and figure out how. It's like you gotta, so these innovators, like someone like you, that is so valuable, I think, for the overall good of like society and economy, all that kind of stuff, and not being stuck in this, like, now we go here and we go to this meeting and we do, you see what I'm saying? That I don't know how to put it into words. I'm still chewing on that, but I'm always like, man, I wonder what the next thing is, because I don't want to be looking like the company at my son going, yeah, this is the way we did it, Sonny. Can you finish that sentence? I don't, you see what I'm saying? I can't.
Well, I think it's just staying on top of technology and, and the way people communicate ultimately is I think what it comes down to, because what we're talking about is how these businesses, past, present, and future, it's like, how are they communicating their product, their brand, their service,
their why. Why are they doing it?
Their why.
Yes, the why.
Yeah.
I know it's like, again, cliche, whatever. Like, I want to feel passionate. I want to wear something across my chest that means something to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't find that very often.
Yeah, well, but it really comes down to, I think what the crux of it is, just like, it's just the current way. It's staying up to date with the current way that the business communicates to the consumers, and not being romantic about how it used to be, right? It used to be the newspaper, and then it was the radio, and then it was the TV, and when the TV came out, people were like, what's this TV thing? Like, we're doing radio. And then, and then it became the internet and cell phones, and people were still like against running Facebook ads. Like, we're going to put TV commercials and billboards and all this stuff. That stuff is like, there might be in cases where it works, but I mean, if you don't have, information coming through the phone to your consumer with all the technology out there, like, you're going to lose, so, it's just, and then it's eventually this thing will be obsolete, and we'll be wearing freaking glasses, and it's going to be like, how do you put ads and market and communicate your why and your message and your whatever it is through this new device on this new platform, and not being like, oh, that's for the kid. Like TikTok, great example. TikTok, that's for kids. That's for 12-year-olds dancing. Okay, not anymore. It's not, and it's a very different platform. It's hard to create for you. You've got a lot of, time constraints you have to sort of abide by. And then there's these, it's vertical. So it's hard for you who's shooting a lot of YouTube videos and horizontal. We got to reformat these, make them vertical, do whatever, But I mean, you've got videos on TikTok that have, a couple million views. So, I mean, it's a real thing. Like, TikTok is early Instagram. And, so, and then it's going to be the next thing, and then the next thing. And if you just stick to like, well, I've always done YouTube, and YouTube works, and, this is what I'm doing, and you never jump on, and then you're so far behind, it's hard to play catch up at that point.
Right. And so, like, the analogy I like to use sometimes for the 20th century CEO, or if you're chatting, because in the past, maybe not so much anymore, the size of the channel and the growth of the company, et cetera. In the beginning, maybe 7, 8 years ago, you go, hey, if my video gets 2 million views, I want you to think of walking into, I'm a New Yorker, Giant Stadium. Let's call it 50,000 people in the stadium. To put an ad up in that stadium on the big Jumbotron, I don't know, for the game, 10,000 bucks. I'm making that up. It's probably way more than that, right? 10,000 bucks. I did 50,000 people, 10,000 bucks. If I did 2 million views, this is one game, by the way. So that's 4 stadiums. It's 40,000 bucks, right? And they go like, okay, where are you going with that? I was like, this one video, I'm now reached 4 giant stadiums filled to capacity with people. Here's the catch. It's forever. It lasts forever. The game is always playing, and they go like, occasionally
stadium's always full,
right? Because if back in the day, you just get advertising, like, I need $1,500 to have, and they're like, well, are you kidding me right now? And I'm like, you just spent 20 grand on a magazine ad. Like what? Like what? How are you? It doesn't make any sense to me, right? So if you look at it, so then I went back and I looked at, and I find it a little bit fascinating. I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but the advertising world. First, the advertising is they would have a magazine and it would say like, buy our Macy's car or whatever, back then, our Sears car, right? And it's just like a flat-footed, here's what we have, here's how much it costs, and buy it. And then they said, hey, we need to put a little bit of sugar on that. You got to put some sugar before you get the medicine down. And then they put like little catchy things and like a pretty girl in a bikini or whatever, right? And you're like, oh, okay. I'm looking at the bikini thing and I want to buy the car. I'm making that up, or the tractor or whatever it is. Then you go, the movies come out, and now you have Brad Pitt walks in and goes like, hey, whatever the hell, their glasses, right? And he puts it on, Brad Pitt glasses. I got to have those glasses. So now they're using these iconic faces or what have you. 20th century, internet, boom, internet explodes. And we're still doing kind of the same thing. And then when TikTok and YouTube starts creating the Justin Biebers of the world, they go, oh, wait a second, like this may have some weight. So those 21st century thinkers are going, hey man, there's these people, they're not celebrities, but they're not advertisers. We're going to call them influencers.
Perfect. Yep.
Boom, influencers explode.
Have you heard the story about Charli D'Amelio? Do you know who this girl is?
Mm-mm.
From TikTok. She is like the most followed person on TikTok. She's 17 maybe now or something. She's got like 120 million followers or something. She's like the most followed person on TikTok. And she was just like a young girl who was, into dance and did dance class and dance competitions, whatever. But she started dancing to these songs on TikTok. And as were many other girls. But she just got traction. Like that tire hooked up and sent her down the track. And now she's like partnered up with a lot of these 20th century Dunkin' Donuts and all this stuff. And they've got you can go order the Charli D'Amelio coffee that, or the whatever iced coffee she likes to drink. Like that's on the menu now. And so they've got these, like you said, these influencers. That's not a new thing now. Like that's been going on for the last 10 years at this point. But
it's interesting to follow the progression is what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's so fascinating.
Like what's going to be the next thing? I mean, that's again, I hate saying that, but like that's the exciting part.
But it's now though, these big companies, these big corporations have like caught onto it in the past couple of years, and that's where you're seeing things really get interesting and what's driving up cost even for us with like Facebook ads as a small business. It's like, okay, now Toyota and BMW and Rolex and they've figured it out. The jig is up. Like they take all their billboard money and TV commercial money and Super Bowl ad money, and they're dumping it into Facebook. They've figured it out.
Here's my prediction. Here's my prediction. I have to make a prediction because I got to put a flag in the ground. And please shoot this down because I need to. I say I need to spar with somebody. I need to like have somebody throw a punch back because I got to figure this out in my head. My prediction is this. So we have the influencers now, and the 20th century guys. Boom! They got whacked, and they're like, "What is going on?" So now they're on their heels, and they're like, "No, we're still relevant. We're still relevant. We're going to pay this random guy who's got 120 million subscribers, blah, blah, blah." They don't know jack all about whatever it is that they're selling. I sell belts and glasses or whatever, right? They're not the glass expert. They're not the car. They're just Kim Kardashian. Do I have to say anymore? Like she tweets and she gets $10 billion or whatever it is, right? So this blanket carpet approach, just bomb everything, right? My prediction is the company's going to go, I think what we should do, I'm trying to word this correctly, is instead of pay influencers, why don't we just create homebred, a farm system of people who exemplify our je ne sais quoi, our why, our purpose, our reason, our brand I think I'm thinking in 5 or 10 years or whatever it is, the companies are finally going to look at it and go like, we just spent $35 million on this 17-year-old girl to put lipstick on, or I'm making that up, whatever the thing is, right? There's 1,000
Whatever.
variations,
Yeah.
right? And they're going to go like, at some point, that number is going to reach a particular point, a line in the sand where the CEO is going to go, the hell with this. I'm not going to spend this money every year. We're going to take it and we're going to put it in our farm system. And then we're going to have the Bob Vila of the market. We're going to have the person be the face
Yeah, we
of.
create our own personalities. Yeah, create their own influencer, essentially, right?
That's what I think is going to happen.
Teams of influencers.
Right.
Yeah.
So spar with me. Tell me why that's a bad idea. If it is.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, it's a lot of companies have done that and have been built on that. I don't think you're wrong. I don't know. I think that there's still a world where they're not just going to cut spending on relevant people who are hitting different markets, because I think it would take a long time for them to cultivate their own groups of people for these markets. So it's a fast track. Like, let's just, we want to put our foot in the fishing world or whatever. So it's like, I'm going to pay top dollar to get, to be part of like the number one fishing guy in the world. And we're willing to do that to sell our bait or tackle and whatever it is, right?
Yeah, no, it's a good example.
So it's like you fast track it like that way. But I think in terms of building brand, like long term, where it takes a little while, like you find the right people who have the right personality and the right energy and the right moral values and all those things that can like really represent your brand, and you cultivate that and you put them on a pedestal and they are now like the brand. I think that's already happening in a lot of cases.
I think it's gonna be a combination.
Usually it's somebody who's an owner or yeah, exactly. I don't think the CEOs are going to stop it, but I mean, Black Rifle Coffee was built off of sort of their own influencer who's also an owner. Are you familiar with Black Rifle Coffee?
I through you guys, but not. I don't drink coffee, so that's not a big thing in my life. But I say it through you.
But I mean, they just went public. They started in 2015.
Public, like IPO public?
IPO public, and they are huge. And this is built. And here's the thing. This goes back to what we were talking about before, the why, right? Like, they sell coffee and so does everyone else. So you can go get free coffee at the gas station or whatever, right? Like, you don't have to buy it in a lot of, like, you go to the hotel lobby, like, oh, just a cup. It's a commodity. It's free. Like, you can get it anywhere for very little money. But they've created such brand and such why and such a following with their message. And this is what we stand for. And people have flocked to it. Like, we want to be a part of what those guys are doing. They're badass. They're awesome. They're veterans. They're blowing shit up. They're hiring veterans. They're saving people. They're whatever their brand messaging. So they run and they're supporting them by buying their coffee and t-shirts, with funny sayings on them or whatever the case is. But it really got built on the back of Matt Best, who is like, one of their co-founder owners, who's an influencer in his own right, but he made these like ridiculous, funny skit videos that it was actually an apparel brand before it turned, and their apparel brand was called Article 15. And that really had some legs, and they were just selling t-shirts and hats. And then they started selling whiskey. And one of the things that their sort of co-owners, Evan, was into just like roasting coffee. He's like, hey, I'm really into this. Like, let's just like do a bag of like we do. Like, hey, let's just do a bag of coffee to be fun. Like our audience will like that. Well, then the coffee starts to outsell the shirts and all this stuff. And they're like, maybe we should just switch to doing coffee full time and like screw these t-shirts. So they did. They just switched it over, and it's like, okay, Article 15 they still do t-shirts as Article 15. And then there's Black Rifle Coffee. They just went full send. Super like ridiculous scalable brand. They do a really good job. Their branding, their marketing, their teams behind it, the content they make, like everything is top notch. And I think the biggest thing that stands out is they know exactly who they are, and they're willing to tell the world exactly what they think about whatever the thing is. And they just plant their flag. And if you agree with it, cool, come on, hang out and have fun. If you don't agree with whatever our thoughts or viewpoints or opinions are, then like, deuces, see you later. And people like that. They're like, I want to be a part of what these guys are doing. And they're selling ungodly amounts of coffee They've done a great job. They're really cool guys. I've spent time with them and hung out with them. And Evan, their CEO, I mean, he's just a really humble, cool, nice guy. And they're opening coffee shops all over the country. They're gone public. Good for them. They're a super new company that was built on YouTube and Instagram, and they've taken it all the way. It's so cool.
That's unbelievable. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's a great story. I need to
but it's built on it's built on having their own influencer, right? They're not having to pay, like, that's the thing. It's like, and the same thing that's like similar to what I'm trying to do with myself. Like, I need to prop myself up, as the face of our brand, and just get me more exposure, right? Which is way easier said than done. It's like, you can get me more exposure. It gets the brand more exposure in a more organic way than trying to shove down someone's throat. You need to buy this diaper bag because it's awesome. And it's
right.
like, hey, this guy seems cool. He's into cars and guns, and he's sewing stuff. And, this is their company. And this is like, yeah, I want to support this. Like, this is cool. I want to be a part of what is going on here.
The community around
community. It's the community. It's all of that. It's not, I've got a tchotchke to sell you. It's $5. Come and get it. Look how good it keeps your car. And it's like, I don't subscribe to that business model at all.
I totally agree.
It's not totally sustainable.
Agree. The world is changing.
You can have short-term success with it. Like you said, Trav, like, it's not sustainable. You can have short-term success with that, but will it last? When the next platform and the communication method changes from this device to the next device, and the brand or the person that has that following, can migrate to that. But when you're just selling a tchotchke, and then, all of a sudden now Amazon's gone, you got nothing. You're done.
The internet is a very tricky place, meaning it's a double-edged sword. You can sell these tchotchkes. We get a lot of that in the detailing industry. Like, boom, this thing that lasts 7,000 years or whatever. And then at the same time, it's also not very good. The customers go like, yeah, I mean, come on, we're really smart. You know why? Because we've learned all these videos. We've watched all these things. We've read, we understand. You're not going to be able to just like flash something.
Larry, your customers trust you for, I don't know how, like, I don't know, very rarely, if ever, do you go into a YouTube video being like, hey, to clean this interior, first you go to my website and you buy this product, and then you buy the brush. You don't do that.
I've never done that. In fact, I've had people call and say, like marketing people being like, you're insane, you're losing X amount of dollars. And then I've had customers call. It's a longer play. It's not something, I'm not really good. I'm the worst salesman in the world because I can't stand being sold to. I can see through BS in like 2 seconds. I'm like, this is a waste of my time, and I don't want to be anywhere near that. Do I want people to buy products? Yes. I want $10 zillion a day of of course. But that's a big thing. Even customers would call and they would be like, so what product are you using? I watched your video. I'm like, man, I am really going on the other side. They didn't even know that I made it.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line.
Yeah. Well, and that's just the thing, though. You say you're the worst salesman, but I think the best way to sell something is to not try to sell it. As soon as you start trying to sell it, it's now you're trying to convince.
It's conviction, and persuade, not convincing people. I call it conviction. Like I know that my stuff is great. You know why? Because I make it and I use it on these cars. You want to use it? Great. And this isn't a sale. I don't give a crap about. Use it, don't use it. McGuire, there's lots of great things you could. McMother's fantastic. Go do it. But my stuff is I bleed for it, and I think people go like, oh yeah, this guy is legit because I'm literally doing the cars. I'm not in a suit. I'm not the guy with the belly I was talking about before, being like, yeah, get down there and make this up. Like, I've kind of seen not all of it, but I've seen the different facets, and I knew that this is where I wanted to go. And could the company be 50 times larger than it is? I think within 6 months. I have no distributors. People think I'm crazy. They're like, you're either a genius or a moron. I was like, wow, okay, thank you. I'm not exactly sure how to take that, but hopefully time will tell. But so I have zero distribution, which baffles people's minds because we're approaching almost 800 requests, a little less than 800 around the world. And shipping, as you know, is a nightmare. So I can't exactly ship to all the places that I want to ship because I go like, you know what? Like right now, the UK is shut down. My huge market for detailing. You can't buy it in the UK. Why? Because shipping is a nightmare. So the point I'm making is I've narrowed it down. If I wanted to be that like, hey, come buy one, that kind of thing, I would change the model completely. And I think people would look at it and be like, he's full of shit. It's over kind of thing.
Yeah, Larry's a sellout.
Yeah,
would be a lot of comments real quick.
Sure.
Let's switch gears here a little bit. I could talk about this stuff all day long, but I want to give the listeners a little bit more diversity here. Let's talk about detail. Let's talk about some of the chemistry behind it and why certain things work better than others, and what types of products to use in different scenarios and situations. Because there's always, obviously, the right tool for the job. And let's get into your brain on the chemistry side of things and how and why things work. So take us back to high school chemistry class here. Let's talk about pH. That's a big one, right?
The number one thing that you do is you marry someone who has a PhD in chemistry, and
Step one.
Step one. Ironically, that is the truth too. So this is a ginormous topic, and we're an hour in or whatever.
Does she play a big part in helping you understand and come up with some of these formulas and working through problem solving?
Working through problem solving.
Good luck, you're on your own.
Working through problems where I'll have her read something that's like way over my pay grade, and the joke is, forgive the pun, but it's I say she makes sure I don't blow shit up, basically. Like I don't put things together. So,
don't do this.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't press the red button.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't blow up the meth lab.
Yeah. But no, I try to keep a little bit of separation of church and state there. But she will help me from time to time for sure. So the moral of the story is the number one thing that I think is not present so much in detailing, even though it's all of detailing, it's just not sexy. And I'm almost fearful to talk about it because I know I wouldn't say I have a target on my back, but I'm very honored to be, there's imitation all over the place, which is great. And I understand, but there's imitation where people are like, I went to SEMA, and one guy's like, I literally started my company and did everything that you did, and we're at SEMA today. And he wanted to take a picture with me and gave me a hat with basically my logo on it. And I was like, that's not cool.
Imitation's the best form of flattery, but sometimes it goes a little far.
It goes
right?
a little far.
Like,
so
you just ripped me off.
No.
So I hesitate, but at the end of the day, my model is a freemium model. I'm trying to give away everything. If I can inspire some folks to do their thing, great. But let's not call it schmammo. But anyhow, you'd be surprised, man. All day long, I'm
bullet detailing.
Yeah.
Bullet. Don't give me anyone ideas.
Yeah. So anyways, the moral of the story with detailing is it comes down to the chemistry. It comes down to pH levels, and figuring out what you're cleaning. So the methodology now is, this car is dirty, so we are going to wash it and it's going to be clean. And it's like, holy cow, it's very mechanical. This is how you do it, right? It's not really how it works. There's bugs. You can't see it here because it's too far away, but there's bugs on the front of these. There could be salt on it because we're getting into winter. The point I'm trying to make is the stain or the thing that you're trying to remove has a certain pH level, right? Has a certain acidity, has a certain base to it. You have to clean it with certain products. And that concept, I think, is underutilized in the detailing industry and around. So let's say you spill coffee in your car. Like very common. We just talked about coffee. Just pick random coffee. Great. You're not going to go in there and clean it with something like a degreaser. I'm making that up as well. Oh, I spilled coffee. Let me go grab my.
But that's common. The all-purpose cleaners, you talk about APCs all the time, right?
Yeah.
It's like you don't grab an all-purpose cleaner for certain.
You know why they call it all-purpose?
There's a time and a place for it, because it probably doesn't. It's like neutral.
Because it sells more. Because you go like, it's all-purpose. Boop, grab it.
Works on everything.
Works on everything.
Multifunctional.
Right. It's a whole marketing thing. So like the underlying key, the foundation, the building blocks, however you want to describe it in detailing, and we can go down this forever, but I'm trying to keep it as short as possible, is understanding what you're cleaning and then getting something that you know is going to clean that thing that you just discovered. It's as basic as that. So if you have coffee stain, you're not going to grab a degreaser because degreaser is not going to work on that. You got to grab something that's designed to clean coffee stains. If you have a blood stain or tannin stain, you're going to grab a tannin cleaner. If you have salt on your car, you're not going to use.
Listen, we got parents here. Let's get some real life examples. Our child just spilled some juice in the back of the car on the seat.
Okay.
What are we trying to look for to grab?
So there's certain cleaners that attack a tannin stain. A tannin stain is a certain type of material that's in, let's say, fruit and juice and things of that nature. I'm trying to be as broad and vague as possible because it's going to get really crazy. There's certain cleaners for that. Of course, I have a cleaner, but there's lots of cleaners that focus on those things. Now, versus, let's say the kid throws up and there's body fluid in there. There's dog pee and poo. The kid, something, you need an enzyme cleaner, something that's going to chew up the bacteria. Hitting it with degreaser, an all-purpose cleaner, is not going to do anything except spread it all out. Again, we're at 10,000 foot view. I'm not going to go like crazy deep here, but there's specific cleaners for specific things. And if I leave this podcast with just that, just know that when you're, what's the saying? When you are a jack of all trades, you're a master of none. I mean, of course, it's a great cliche because it makes sense. You gotta sniper clean. That's just, you could get there quick. Speed, meaning how long it sits, and what you clean it with immediately is everything. End of story. Good night. Thank you for being on the podcast. I mean, it's like that. Like it's that simple.
And that's all around. That's all around. That's not just stains on the inside, but that's also the outside of the car. To your point earlier, it's like if you have bugs on the car, you need. I don't know if it's low pH or high pH. I'm not nerding out on that. Give us an example of like.
All right. So let's say you
ends
have
of pH.
Yeah. Let's say you have
different uses.
Salt on your car, minerals. You're going to use a lower pH to be able to clean those minerals, right? But if you use let me get a better example. Is your soap pH balanced? If I hear that another time, I'm going to lose my mind. And the answer is pH balanced soap is great at cleaning a car that's not very dirty. And so I say, is your car really dirty? Oh, my car is really dirty, but I need a pH balance. I was like, well, then you're not going to do anything to the car. Relatively speaking, they're all varying degrees of this. I'm sure one person would be like, well, I did, and it worked. I'm not getting into an argument with me, but the point I'm trying to make is if it's covered in salt, you're going to use something like a low pH. If you're, have bugs and things, you're going to use a base. You're going to use something that's a different pH, a higher pH. So when you go through a car wash, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so high pH is a base. Low pH is more acid, correct?
Yes, yes. Yeah. Again, on the scale, and 7 would be neutral for argument's sake. I mean, it is, but you got it. pH balance. So if you have pH balance soap, so the examples that I give is if you're washing your hair, and I guess what I'm saying is the detailing industry has just been like, buy this thing and it'll solve all your problems. But if you whittle down to, let's say, the body care, hair, face, all that stuff, that is a more advanced industry. So if you say, I have regular hair, you're probably going to have something that's closer to 7, closer to neutral. No, I have really, really greasy hair. Well, you're not going to have something neutral because you're not going to clean. You need a degreaser for your hair. Just like if you spilled grease on your floor mats, meaning that your shoes are all full of grease from the tar on the pavement or whatever, you're not going to clean it with a normal cleaner. You got to degrease it. You got to have a pH level that's going to attack the oils. Likewise, if you have dandruff,
and is that high or low? That's a high pH.
That's a higher pH. Yeah. When I say higher, it's hard to say high or low. It's higher than, it's relative.
Right, but that's a more of a base than an acid, I guess, is
correct.
Trying to understand.
Yes, and then let's say you have dandruff. Right? So you have really dry skin, you're going to be using a different type of pH for that. Like if you look at the back of your dandruff bottle, it's a different pH, but nobody would ever argue and be like, I need a pH balance to wash my hair. It's like, it's known already, regular soap and dandruff soap. So my kind of like, again, high level, we can get into a whole like 5-hour conversation about it or whatever, is we kind of have to look at these the same way. We have to kind of look at the interior stains the same way, where it becomes normal. Like, oh, I get it. It's a this stain. And you know who's advanced the most in this is carpet cleaners. Carpet cleaner, like companies, Stanley Steamer, all these. There's companies that specialize in just cleaning carpets. The technology to clean carpets is bananas, bro. Crazy. My favorite words. Right? You know me. I wish I had my banana here.
Bananas.
Bananas.
Where's your banana suit?
Yeah. So it's just funny that detailing is lagging behind that. So that's kind of my prediction going forward. If anybody who's a master detailer or crazy watching this, I'm winking and nodding at you. That was a very broad statement I just gave. But the point is, we're not doing a detailing lesson right now.
The point is made for somebody who's like listening to this and they don't really they're not really, in the world of like really taking care. They're going to start to think about it. Next time their kid throws up in their car, they're not going to go grab 409 to clean it up. They're going to think, they're going to put 2 more seconds of thought and be like, okay, I need to grab something that's more designed for a organic stain like throw up. Maybe it's a pet stain remover that
Right.
might be better suited for this that they
That's
have in the
100%
closet.
correct. It's an
or
enzyme cleaner,
whatever.
pet stain cleaners, that kind of thing. Yeah. So the last analogy I'll make is when you go into most mechanical car washes are also very, not hand washes. I'm being very clear about what
Maybe.
they're very advanced because you have to do a lot of work without having manpower there. You have to have machines doing things. So it has to be very precise because you can damage things. What that means is the chemistry behind it is usually pretty precise because we're talking big money in car washes. Big money. Detailing is a joke compared to, mechanical, 5,000 car washes around the world, and they're called spiffy or whatever, right? So what happens is a lot of times it's kind of fascinating. And forgive me, I'm not in the mechanical car wash industry, so I might have this backwards. But essentially, from what I understand, is when you go in, you get that pre-soak. That pre-soak is usually, I think, a high pH. Might be backwards, but I think it's high pH to get like the bugs and stuff off. So your car first gets doused with high pH, then it goes in, and then soap hits it. More lubrication, and the machines do their thing or whatever. And then when it comes out, it's counterbalanced at some point with a low pH, right? So it balances itself out, which is usually those little sprayers, and then it blows it off, etc. Again, I am simplifying it. I'm sure someone's going to crush what I just said. I'm not a car wash guy. I admit that, mechanical thing, but I know that they typically have the opposite.
That there is chemistry going on in those car washes specific to where you live, what the conditions are,
right?
If
you're in
very
Florida,
specific, and they're tweaking it and changing it.
Yep. More higher because you got more bugs and June bugs or whatever they're called. If you're in Alaska, I'm making that up, or some cold place, you're going to have probably something more low pH because you have a lot more salt. Or what I'm saying is there's a dial back there. They're like, and they dial it based on the seasons, which to me, I thought that's a cool example, right? That's like, oh yeah, those guys are doing something. We haven't
assuming the people running that car wash give a shit and they're not just like taking your money and they're like, wow, whatever.
True.
But to your point, I think we talked about this before. If you got customers that aren't happy and their car isn't clean and whatever, they're not coming back.
Right. So, like, and if we circle back to the first thing, we were making chemistry. We were making products for those car washes. Remember when I said we put the 55 thing, and we were making products for those folks because they're focused on turn and burn. We call it turn and burn, turn and burn, turn and burn. I want a 55-gallon drum. That thing's got to last me 2 months, and it cost me $200, whatever the case is. So to jump from that market into the retail is awesome because you're one-on-one with customers. But one of the downsides is you lose a little bit of that, the chemistry thought of it's my job to now educate the customer. So that's what I'm really trying to focus on now. So there you go.
So one last kind of tidbit, maybe some helpful information for parents, as we have many listening, and you're a parent yourself, as I am. The big fear like that I have around letting my kids help me wash the car, right? We talked about this last time when I screwed up the audio, but you made a good point, with the 2-bucket method, and if you're very cautious about certain things. So give the people listening, if you have a 5-year-old son that wants to help you, or daughter, or whatever, that wants to help you wash the car, and you don't want the thing hitting the driveway and you're picking up rocks and dirt and then scrubbing your car and basically sanding it, prepping it for more to be painted again.
Yeah.
What is the proper way to have to wash the car, one, but more importantly, like, if you want to get your kids helping you and they want to be involved, like,
yeah. So I would say first off of that, like, that's one of the greatest like things in my life, all being, not trying to be too corny here, but like Saturday and Sunday mornings doing the wash, and give your wife a break, and you're doing, that's like everything for me at this point. Having said that, and every parent will know, every non-parent will be like, he's losing his mind. So fine. Next thing is you want to make sure you protect them like crazy, because I find that it's like a weird badge of honor, certainly with a 5-year-old, to like spray himself with everything that's not water. So the eye protection, and this isn't just like a CYA kind of thing. I literally mean that. I would throw away and burn down every one of these cars for, you get my point. Like, protect your child, put some things on it, wear little gloves, whatever. So from there, to protect the car, now the very tertiary, like, who cares about the car when you're talking about a kid? But to answer your question, the history used to be you're going to do multiple buckets. So you have one bucket here, two buckets, and then a third bucket. So you'd have three buckets. One would be designated just for the wheels. We'll talk about that in a second. And then you'd have two buckets for the paint. Now, this is the old way, but it's important to understand where we came from. One bucket would be full of water, maybe about halfway, three quarters, let's call it clean, fresh water, no soap, nothing. The next bucket over here, be halfway, three quarters, etc., full of soap, suds coming out, all the crazy fun looking things. And inside would be a wash mitt. You take that wash mitt out, you would wash the car, dunk it in the clean water. Oh, all the dirt came out, dunk it back in the soap, and rewash your car. That was the way that it was done in the past. We've now changed that method, and here's the new method and why it's great for the car, plus why it's great for working with a child, which is what your question is. So now we've taken these two buckets away. Now we have one bucket. Inside the bucket, it's about maybe halfway, quarter, maybe less than half full of water. Inside the water is soap. You've soaped it up. It looks, it looks soapy inside. Great. Inside are 6 towels, 5, 6, 4, 3. Doesn't matter. It depends on the size of the car and how big it is. But for argument's sake, let's say 6 brand new towels in there. They're all soapy and wet and lubricated. I take my
microfiber towels.
Microfiber towels. Thank you. That's a very big key. Not terry towels. Microfiber towels. Thank you. You pull the towel out. You wipe the car. Your daddy or mommy, whoever, wiping the car from top to bottom, doing your thing. Junior comes over. They pull their own towel out, and now you fold it into 4s, and they're working on the front and all the lower parts of the car. Right at this point, your car has also been wet. I forgot to say it. You've wet it down. You've probably foamed it, so it's dripping in soap. Then you're going in and wiping it down. Right. So there's lubrication on it, and you've already knocked off all the big things. The point I'm trying to make is we've moved to one bucket. The reason we've moved to one bucket is when you're done wiping with the towel, mommy or junior, right? And it's dirty and you folded it a couple times. So every time you wipe on the car, it's a fresh part of the towel. And then you'll flip it over to another fresh side when it gets, because the lower you go on the car, the dirtier it is, right? If you take that towel, you don't dunk it in another, you don't dunk it. It never goes back in this bucket. When it gets pulled out, Johnny never puts it back in the bucket. Mary never puts it back.
He drops it on the ground. He does. It's whatever.
It's gone forever.
Grab another one.
You grab another one. That's kind of the concept. Again, the little rule that we have is we never drop anything on the ground, but we also know that it always drops on the ground. So you take that and you put it, and then you'll wash it in the washing machine later. The point of the story from a detailing perspective is you're not reintroducing junk, regardless of whether it fell on the ground or not. You're not reintroducing into your sterile bucket. You're just pulling more things out. Just like, oh, this is a great analogy. I'm thinking about it now. It's like a baby wipe. When you're wiping a baby's butt, you don't like keep when you're done, you throw it away and you grab another one, right? That kind of mentality. You're not just going to like put it down. It's all filthy and like, I'm going to roll it over and keep wiping. That's gross, right? So that mentality.
Wring it out.
Yeah, you're going to wring it out, wash it out, and do it again. Yeah. So I think if you keep that kind of concept in mind, and however weird way that you can do it, doesn't matter. You don't have to stay perfect with it. It'll prevent you from having. Remember, when a towel falls on the ground, it's the microfiber is designed to catch these little claws. Like if this was a magnifying glass, it literally not a magnifying, under a microscope, it looks like this upside down, right? So when you're wiping, if this is the thing, you're kind of scooping, for lack of a better word, and you're holding things. That's what makes microfiber so great. If it falls on the ground and there's a rock, pretending my hand's a rock, you're going to scoop it up, etc. It's going to stay in there. Even if you go like that, it still kind of stays in there. That's what it's designed to do. He puts it in the water, she puts it in the water, and you wipe it. You are essentially, almost literally, creating sandpaper. Sandpaper is just paper with glue and little bits of sand blown on it, and each of the size of the grit, 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200, whatever, all the way down to 70, 60. You're putting the size of the rock. The smaller the number, the bigger the rock, right? That's what you literally creating sandpaper, and what causes what we call love marks on a car, which is these swipes back and forth. And I'll leave you with this. When I do these seminars, I say, what's the number one thing that causes damage to a vehicle? And everyone raises their hand. Oh, car washes, a tree falling on it. Oh, I drove past bushes or whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay, those are what I would consider emergency, like go to the emergency room. But really the number one damage on a vehicle, I said, everybody raise their hand. They raise their hand. I'm like, it's you people. It's just the act of loving your car. We call it love marks. You're wiping the car improperly. In reality, if you just left the car the way that it is, for this analogy, and never did anything to it and it didn't sit outside, it'd be perfectly fine. We overtouch it. We overdo it. Why? Because we love the cars. We want to do these things. It's therapeutic. It's great. And I am all for doing it. I'm just saying, if you're going to do it, if you're going to have sex, have a condom, right? If you're going to work on a car, have lubrication. You get what? So it's not like I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm saying do it. Just do it right. Do it safe. And then everything, all the problems that would occur otherwise will be gone. And so that's kind of and people go, lubrication anytime you touch a car, polishing it, wiping it, you always want to have some sort of lubrication on it. Me going over and wiping this and saying like, look how clean this is. That's literally putting a scratch in the car, just like the kid would if they dropped the towel. So that's kind of the kid story wrapped in all of detailing. Make sense?
Cool. Awesome. Well, apparently my computer's about to die. So we're going to wrap this up. Larry, tell everybody where they can find you real quick, and then we'll tell them that they can save some money somewhere.
Sure. AMMONYC.com. So ammo like ammunition, but not, and NYC like New York City. We're no longer there because of COVID and all that kind of crazy stuff. But AMMONYC.com. This shop is up in Connecticut, and Instagram and all the grams and the talks and all the things.
YouTubes and
all that stuff.
Yeah. I'm gonna get Larry to give everyone listening 10% off their first purchase. You good with that?
Make it happen. Come up with something clever.
One time only. We'll put a coupon code in the description. It'll probably be like TBG10. Let's just say it. It's TBG10. It'll get you 10% off your first purchase at ammonyc.com. I would recommend getting a kit of some kind, like an interior cleaning kit or the wheel clean, or like the exterior, like
starter
the exterior kit, the starter kit, exterior kit, and interior kit, something that kind of gives you a little bit of everything and get really started, taking care of your car the right way with some really awesome products, and give Larry a little love and support at the same time. Dude, thank you so much.
No worries.
I really appreciate it. This was fun. This is a good one.
I do have one last question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
Travis,
we have volume now?
Travis will let us know. Yeah, Travis will let us know when he's editing if I screwed up again.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave your ratings, comments, reviews, all that kind of stuff. I'd really appreciate it. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.